Welcome back to Dev Game Club, a weekly podcast in which two veteran game developers look at games from the past to discuss their relevance and impact today. I'm Brett Duville, and I'm joined as always by my co-host, a man who might be a man or might be a bowling ball dreaming he's a plate of sashimi.
What? You warned me on this one, and it's not. I'm thinking. It's not coming to me.
Okay, who are you?
A bowling ball dreaming that they are sashimi. Is that what you said?
Yeah, a bowling ball dreaming he's a plate of sashimi.
No.
So if you go and talk to, can you at least just say your name so people know who you are?
Oh, sorry, Tim Longo.
Thank you.
It doesn't help me, but it does help them.
Anyway, so in the Castle of Dreams or whatever where the queen is, if you talk to all the people, it's actually in the first town, I guess, and Hassa maybe I think was the name of it. I think it's actually there in the first town. There's a person that you talk to in there who says, "Am I a man? A butterfly dreaming I'm a man, or am I a bowling ball dreaming I'm a plate of sashimi?" And then just disappears.
I would have remembered that. I don't think it's in my translation.
Was it
the little creature guy, the yellow golden creature guy that disappears?
Must be, yes. Must be the same one, yeah. So they probably said something different.
He did. I think he did. He had something just as sort of ethereal to say, or what have you, or metaphorical to say. But I don't remember what he said. But I think I would have remembered that one, though.
I had to write it down.
Of course you did, yeah.
It's pretty good.
How wild the translations are so... Not. I was going to say far off. I don't think that's really fair. They're just so different. They made different creative decisions, as we've talked, ad nauseum about. But how funny, yeah. And if you keep talking to that little guy, he bounces around, right? So, he kind of keeps telling a little bit of a story, at least for me.
How would you describe the tone overall? I mean, I'm wondering if the tones are generally consistent between us, even if the translations are not.
Oh, that's an interesting question. I don't,
because I found it very light and somewhat jokey in that way. A lot of references, right? We've talked already about sort of how they've slipped in, I don't remember, there was that neighborhood, Medina, was it?
Yeah.
And other things like that that are, right, Medina, excuse me. Or naming the three henchmen of, Ozzie, right, Flea and Slash or what have you, and they just kind of bring in that for proper names. But there's also there are tonal differences. I know my frog, Longo, speaks, sort of the King's English to some degree, Queen's English, I guess.
So bummed about that too.
That's a shame that you're missing that. And then beyond that, I just it feels very kind of light and bouncy, not. Yeah.
No, okay. I think I would describe it generally that way too. I've been constantly surprised about. So yes, overall I agree. I think the tone is around the same. I think. Though I don't have bowling ball and sashimi lines, there's a bit of, I don't know, the only word I can think of is sort of gravity that is like everyone, there's the lightheartedness to it overall, but there's these moments and lines here and there. I didn't write any of them down, so I can't unfortunately regurgitate them, but there's these lines that seem to be sort of heavy. And have and usually it's just a villager, right? And I think that they do a good job. And I've really loved, like, for instance, in a section that we'll talk more about later, but I mean, in the section where you meet the Earthbounders or whatever they're called.
Right. The people who have no magic.
Yeah. And we had a similar conversation about the folks that are in the future, right? In the post-apocalyptic era. And, they're able to have this lighthearted, almost like we talked about in the Ni no Kuni way, sort of a kid-oriented game. But then there's some pretty heavy things that people say and are happening to people. And I really like that a lot. I'm impressed that they were willing, I guess, to do that, and maybe it's something that they do in all their games. And I'm just, I don't remember from Final Fantasy. Well, Final Fantasy 9 had a lot of that too, right? I feel like with the little guy,
Vivi,
Vivi, especially, right? There was, you're sort of like, you're caught off guard, right? Because you're really enveloped in this kind of game that you're playing, especially in Final Fantasy 9 because of the art style, right? Compared to, say, what I know of 7 and 8. And so you're like, oh, this is going to be playful, blah, blah, blah. And then the stuff with Vivi, and you're like, whoa, what is happening? And I have a lot of those, whoa, what is happening moments with this game, which I really enjoyed. It's definitely a game that has, kept me guessing and kind of caught me off guard multiple times.
Yeah, I would say that too. And I think so. I do think even if the particular bowling balls and sashimis are not the same, that it does feel like there are moments of whimsy, but there are definitely situations that are messed up, and they're not afraid to be messed up. The future where everybody's hungry all the time, their bodies are kept in shape by the energy tron or whatever it is, but they're miserable. I mean, they're just miserable.
Yeah.
You even go to where that blue thing is helping the scientist, and that's all sad. He's trying to remember what the final instruction he was given was, and before you get the ship.
Yep.
He's trying to remember what he's supposed to do, but he's clearly at the end of his useful life. And that's strange. I mean, there's a lot of things like that are just moments. And yes, the whole Earthbounders kind of area all has that, like, what's going to happen now? It's, and there's a moment where the chain or whatever breaks, and you see them and they're like, uh-oh, well, we might all die. And they're like, well, we really can't go anywhere. There's, we could never run fast enough. I mean, it's handled a lot better than, as I was saying on the stream, like the Avengers Age of Ultron basically has that happen. A floating thing falls down to the earth again, and it just we just move past that. And it's just, I mean, here it's like, no, this is bad, right? There's like an unintended consequence of your action, and that, right. And that, I guess, gets back to one of the themes that we talked about in the very first episode, which was that this might be a game about how your actions have consequences. And it's starting to feel that way. So,
yeah. And they use big events to punctuate that, for sure, right? With the Lavos stuff, and like, so to jump in a little bit to the first section we played in this particular episode with Magus's castle, and kind of culminating in the Lavos summoning, I think is what I'm remembering.
Yes.
The whole Lavos sort of timeline is definitely starting to confuse me a little bit, but I think I understand it now, and as a quick aside, as anyone who listens to the podcast regularly knows, like, I'm a big sort of lore junkie and, narrative junkie. And I love, so far in this game, one of the things that I did not expect is sort of the concept of Lavos as this sort of big bad, and the sort of unraveling of the mystery behind what the heck is up with that thing. You know what I mean? And of course, also from time to time, I mention sort of how big of a fan of cosmic horror I am. And now my impression of Lavos is that he's a cosmic horror creature that's come from outer space. You know what I mean? And
right.
You don't really know that at the beginning. You hear, we talked about this in the first episode, they mention Lavos, right? And you're like, whoa, what's Lavos? And then you get a little bit of, a little hint here and a little hint there. And then but then it's like, oh, and the robot thinks that Lavos was generated in 600, I think is what they said, right? So the sort of, even the history of the planet is incorrect, right? And then you, like you said, with these big events that the player is essentially impacting with your choices, you're sort of unraveling the truth about how things are using time travel. And I love it, but I have to admit, like the web is definitely throwing me for a loop right now, because I'm having trouble keeping track of, like, that I almost want like an in-game like timeline menu or something where I can kind of see it all. Because I did browse through the manual. I don't think they do anything like that, but of course they would give away too much. But it's like watching Memento or something, or like Looper, or some time travel movie where you want a mind map of it, so It's still fun, and I think I generally get it, but I am losing a little bit of grasp, especially where we stopped about what's happening.
Yeah, I'm not normally the lore guy, but it's actually more like the proper name soup and stuff like that I really just usually don't care about at all. Because I do actually like stories. I mean, I like JRPGs. So I am a guy who plays these long epic stories. But the thing with this is definitely I start to lose track of what's where, to some degree.
Yeah.
In terms of what and how things fit in, right? And I think I've got Lavos kind of all figured out, and some other things that I don't from pre-show think that you've entirely figured out. People who've been watching my stream will know some things that I definitely have opinions about, as far as what might happen in the future of the game, not relative to whatever timeline we're in. Maybe relative, I don't know.
What you're saying just there, you're saying that you have formed a theory on something or someone that's going to do something in the future.
In a different timeline, yes.
Timeline.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I think I have a few as well, but I don't know. Obviously, I don't know if they're the same ones, but we'll have to talk about that next episode.
We'll talk about that next week, when we finish up.
Mm-hmm.
So I definitely, but I have the same thing too, where it's difficult to keep track of it all, and it would be helpful to sort of, I mean, I guess that's why you take notes and maybe keep a page for each thing, like, oh, this is what I've learned happens here, and things like that. But when you start changing things, it's like, is that going to be consistent? I mean, obviously, part of our goal is to fix the timeline, whatever that means, and that's a lot.
Well, with and the joke that is in kind of almost every time travel movie these days is the sort of the ripple effect of any choice that you do make, right? And in this game, I think it kind of has to basically gloss over that, right? Because everything you're doing, there is a cause and effect based on the information you're given. With each timeline, essentially has a conflict of some kind. So you go to that era, and you kind of resolve that timeline, or you resolve that conflict, and it relates to helping a conflict in the future. And so you do that systematically with each sort of chapter. But, technically that the thing you do in 65, million BC would impact all of the other levels in some specific significant way, right? Because it's
right.
So they're just choosing not to deal, they have their own flow chart that's basically just sort of based on the linear progression of the story itself as you play it, and any other repercussions they just are ignoring, which I think is the right thing to do. I probably would have done the same thing. I
mean, how would you know, right? I mean, there's there's limitations on how much you'd really even be able to. It would. I think you have to focus on sort of the important beads on the string. Otherwise, it's basically impossible to know which beads are important. Like what's the story at that point? So I agree. I think that's kind of why they focus on those things.
An example being, no, I agree. It would be maddening, right? And I can't think of a game that did time travel to that degree. Like say, oh man, what was the name of that movie where they make a time machine in a storage unit?
Primer.
There's no game that's done a primer. But
thank goodness, because I've read some of the explanations of Primer and how he probably went back in time 50 times or something like that, and I just
Have you seen the chart? That's the movie. It was on tip of my tongue when I was bringing up sort of like a visualization of it, but they have a pretty infamous.
No,
sort of, I don't know if it's
seen a chart, but I have read like the Wikipedia diegesis of Primer. Another good one is the one where there's an apartment across the way that has a camera that looks into their window that takes pictures at a certain time or something.
It's a movie.
Yeah, it's quite good actually.
I haven't seen that one. I don't think
it's pretty neat because they can, if they pay attention to what's in the picture, they can impact, or they think things are happening and they're trying to. I'll have to look up the name of that. It's
one. Like a Rear Window time travel movie.
Sort of, yeah. It's sort of like Rear Window, but it's themselves looking at themselves.
Whoa!
It's really,
it's
really wild.
I got to find that then. I love this stuff. Yeah, no, I totally agree. You can't go all the way to Primer. By the way, aside, look at that chart that's online someplace that they mapped out. Anyway, but for instance, every time I go back to the original era of 1000, I want something. Every time it's not every time I do something big, but I want more to change there. I feel like, you know what I mean? Because every time I've gone back there a couple of times just to look, to be honest, because I wanted to see, and I'll wander around a little bit, and this is probably why I waste so much time. Talk to a couple of people, see if any voice lines changed or whatever, or go to the fair, for instance, right? Like the fair is your first sort of kind of memorable event, right? Because it's a thing that everyone's talking about and it's happening. And I don't know what I want to happen, but it would be interesting, I think, so I'm just sort of obviously dreaming about something that isn't necessary, but, I think it definitely is trailblazing when it comes to time travel. And I can't, like, something we do on the podcast a lot is we try to put ourselves back in the position of this game having come out on the SNES at that time. And it's sort of astounding, like, as far as like what they're trying to do with this thing. Like, I can totally see, and I think even though at this time I was probably playing more PC RPGs than console RPGs, well, I definitely was. None of them were doing this kind of stuff. You know what I mean? I mean, Ultima dabbled with this sort of like moving through planes and portals and like moon phases and stuff like that, right? And when you figure that stuff out, you feel really smart. But I feel like, I don't know where their influences were, and maybe the book that you have will, kind of did the research. And
I hope I have a chance to finish to read all of that before the next episode. But yeah, but
it's pretty, like, putting myself in a kid's position, playing a SNES game of this kind, especially at the step of the story that we're at right now, where we've kind of, unfurled the fan of all the different options, you know what I mean? And we have the ship and everything. It's kind of mind blowing, to be honest. And so I've enjoyed that.
Yeah, no, I've certainly enjoyed it. This definitely feels to me like Earthbound to some degree, in the sort of way that it feels linear with opportunities to move around, but fundamentally a linear story that you're dealing with, which doesn't bother me. I haven't really missed the fact that there's not more changes. I guess I just don't have the expectation. So
that's
that
fair.
part. Yeah.
It's an unrealistic expectation for sure, but me, it's like they're doing something that I love in storytelling with time travel. And maybe it's Eternal Darkness is one that I'm thinking of that we played, where it kind of dealt with the different impacts almost, of things that happened in the past, etc. But I just love that stuff. And I just, I'm just asking for more unrealistically.
I get it. Yeah. I get it. It's fun stuff. If you ever want to make a time travel game, we'll figure it out.
Yeah. Terrifying. It sounds terrifying. You watch Primer and you're just like, nope, it's not, can't be done.
Forget it. Yeah. Forget
Somebody
it.
will do it though. Somebody. Well, maybe we will.
Mean, Oracle of Seasons.
Did I play that one?
No, you didn't, because I gave it to you and you didn't play it.
Right. So there you go.
Just gonna put that out there.
Well, I mean, you even have Ocarina of Time, right, and stuff like that. So it's like there's dabbling, right? But it's usually just
It's very low. It's very it's in very small kind of locales. You know, you cut down a tree, so the tree's not there. Actually, there's an adventure game that does that on the PlayStation 2. I can't remember. It's like Shadow. Oh, I don't have a
adventure, like traditional adventure.
It's like a third person walk around. You'd say action adventure, but it's not very actiony. It's really just like an adventure game. But you are walking around like, I don't know, like you're in Shenmue or something like that. I wish I could remember the name of it. It's nearby, but I don't think that I don't have a cover for it. I think I bought it used. So it's like from the first year of the PlayStation 2 or so, and it's it's a little odd, but it's got some wild stuff in it. There's points where it's like, if you go to a place where you know your character will be at the same time, the game will end because you can't be in the same place at the same time.
That's awesome.
And it just dies and game over. And so there's interesting stuff in it. Anyway, that's kind of a sidebar. I'll find that name for you as well.
Yeah, interesting.
Try to get all of these things and put them in the show notes or something. Even that movie, if I could remember the name of it. Yes. Anyway, other topics we had. We should probably move through story.
Yeah, real quick though, I did want a quick update on. I did move to wait mode, or whatever it's called. I did turn that on just to see the difference, because I was playing in pure active mode, and it definitely helps. But you were correct in that the difference is pretty slight. All it really does, obviously, is give you a break when you're in the menu. So, which it's funny that I'm a little mixed on what I would put as the default if I were making the game. It's funny to me that active time battle is the default, because I feel like wait is better balanced for what kind of game it is, because it is so menu centric and menu oriented in especially at this point in the game where you have a lot of different spells and abilities and stuff for each character. And in my case, which is probably your case too, not all of them can fit on screen anymore. So you're scrolling below and above, you're scrolling up and down on that little window down below. And so, just like the active time battle feature, unless you've really gotten good at memorizing where everything is, it really just kind of puts you at a disadvantage. And like I said last time, I just didn't explore the abilities. And, I just kind of stuck with the ones that I knew. And now that I've turned wait mode on, it did have the effect that I thought it would, which basically allows me I'm just sitting in that menu looking at everything, right, and seeing what the tooltip says. And I'm definitely using and experimenting way more than I would have. So just a quick update on that. I think, I feel like wait mode is more appropriate for the way the game is paced, especially with some of the harder bosses that we hit in this section.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. For the bosses in particular, it's very helpful to be able to stop and just kind of look at what your options are with these, 2 or 3 characters, whatever, that are currently powered up. I would find it difficult to do anyway, but I would probably just lean into the one thing. So I totally get it. And now it's like, I know it's great in particular because I've been using Marle in my party I think she's been with me since the very beginning, and other characters have swapped out, but she's always been there. And she has a lot of different abilities that are really helpful. She can haste at a certain point, which is really great. So it basically doubles I don't know if it quite doubles, but it speeds up everybody, or it speeds up each character she casts it on for a significant period of time. Wow. So that's a huge help. It just means more bites of the apple, but she also has multiple levels of ice. She also has different techniques that she does with Chrono. So there's just a huge variety, and she can heal. So there's just this wide variety of stuff she can do, and it's super helpful to be able to stop and actually say, okay, what do I need to do with her right now? Where are we? And that's been really helpful for me. and the way I prefer to play. So
I mean, that kind of jogged another thought that we didn't talk about in pre-show, that I have been impressed with, because, so you mentioned in pre-show that you did discover that you can swap party members out on the fly, like I can. So, right? Is that correct?
Yes, yeah. I did.
So the interesting thing about that, even though there are the ones that have the sort of raw elemental effects, and like Luca, for instance, I think she's the only fire one we have, maybe. Mm-hmm. So you're able to swap out on the fly for those reasons, though you can't do it in combat. So there's times when if you wanted to have her, you would have to reload or something or go back. So that's a little frustrating. But they all level up. I don't remember if Final Fantasy IX did this, or if this is just a traditional thing that they all do. But when they're not in your party, they're leveling up. So you don't have that worry. Then the other thing that I've noticed, so I've been pretty consistently using Robo and Glenn. And even though I named him Frog, he's Glenn to me in my heart. And they both essentially have healing options. And it feels like, maybe with the exception of Luca, even Ayla has like a heal that's called Kiss.
Ayla has a heal called Kiss, yes.
Yeah, and so
it also heals status effects, so it's pretty useful.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah. The way they designed each of the party members is actually pretty versatile, you know what I mean? And it feels like, my memory of Final Fantasy IX is that, there were a couple that were clearly the healers, and they did other things, but generally, if you needed a healer, you had to pick a couple of those. But I don't feel that anxiety this time, because I can kind of be pretty, even though I stayed consistent with those two, I feel like I could swap out and still feel like I'm covered in the sort of core, the core abilities that I need. And, they all attack, for instance, right? I don't know, and they all have some sort of big spell based on their element. So maybe that's just a thing that they all do. And I just haven't played enough JRPGs, but I guess
they certainly don't all do that.
Okay.
I think that actually ties into sort of the sort of party exploration, mm-hmm. being a possible thing that you wanted to do. Mm-hmm. Try out different combinations and see how they feel to you, and I think that all of that kind of supports that. Having less clearly defined roles, as well as that sort of side leveling that's going on, that definitely is not a guaranteed thing. There are definitely games where you don't have that at all.
Side leveling as well.
The side leveling, I think that's not consistently applied. Yeah. No, I mean, I don't know if I don't know where it kind of comes in and goes out of games in the JRPG lineage, but I've definitely played JRPGs with it and without it. And I mean, that's one of the things I think that has made me tend to stick with the characters I start with, because mm-hmm. leveling the other ones is going to be a pain, and equally leveling things around can be a pain. Mm-hmm. I do appreciate that. I feel like, I can't remember if 12, I don't think 12 leveled everybody equally. So you sort of had your party, and then, at a certain point, the other characters are, a dozen levels behind. And it's just like, well, can't deal with that.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it kind of relates back to the grind, and kind of like, that sort of embracing
right
that sort of extra grind. And so, well, I'm already grinding, I'll go swap these characters or whatever. The thing,
and I've definitely done that. Yes. I mean, and you can do that with Ni no Kuni, for example, because you have tons of, it's Pokemon, right? So you have tons of Pokemon. Pokemon works this way as well. As only the one who actually fights even gets XP in Pokemon, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of different models.
Yeah, so that's a good example. I forgot about that. Yeah, just having that one, you're clearly winning, and you just want to have that one Pokemon come in and hit once, so you get some XP from it,
exactly,
and even though the other one did all the damage. So that sort of that tactic. Yeah, it's so funny, because I know the design methodology behind that, and I understand it, and I can't say that I would never not, that I would never not do it, or however I want to say it. I would design a game that way. And I understand the sort of the motivation you're trying to put the player through. But as a player, especially in a game like this, and the reason I say this is because I feel like we talked about with not only the voice line or the dialogue lines from each of the characters being so interesting, but also just each of the characters each of the party members has a lot of character and they're very memorable. I think because they're so associated, the thing that I'm kind of on the fly realizing as we're talking about this is because each character so far that we've gotten is associated with their time for the most part, other than Marle and Luca, obviously. At least in my case, like I love the fact that I have Glenn from 600 and I have Robo from 2300. And so, there's like this, there's more of a sort of association and weight behind them. But the min-maxer in me, if they weren't leveled up together and they didn't have more utilitarian spells like heal, the min-maxer in me wouldn't use them, even though I would really like to, because I'm drawn to them as a character. You know what I mean?
Right.
I love this party because I have a frog knight and a robot with me. It's just the best thing, and I don't feel punished, right? If I had to level them up separately, I'd feel like, well, I love these characters, but I don't want to go and grind, and you know what I mean? So they're supporting the sort of story that they're wanting to tell, I think. And the writing reflects that, and the translation reflects that, I think, with how fun it is to have Glenn. I'm trying to think of a good example. Like, where were we? It must have been in the Antiquity or something. There's just both Glenn and Robo say the most hilarious things because they're so out of context, right? Like, they come in and the robot's like, what is happening? Like, my data banks say this, and this, and we're doing this, and he's sort of like constantly surprised because his data is incorrect or something, and then Glenn's always like, what the heck is going on? So I just love it.
Well, that's good. I'm basically slowly turning you into a JRPG fan, so it's working. It's working. My long multi-year plan with the podcast is coming to fruition bit by bit.
The long game. Yeah, that would be another great sort of grand comedy that you'd be playing on me, is that the whole podcast purpose was to get me to play JRPGs. It's a good one. That was a good one. I'd give you that one.
It's going to be only JRPGs at a certain point. We're just like,
right.
Now we're a JRPG cast.
Yeah.
Let's, since we're already half hour in, let's start going through the sort of story of what we played this time. We are going to try to keep the podcast a little shorter tonight. But there are a couple topics that I think will come up as we do it. We'll just kind of address them as we hit them. So we started at entering Magus's castle.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I know that this was one of your favorite boss fights, but we should probably get to it first. First, you've got to kind of make your way through this very eerie place, right? I mean, I did notice that there was no music when you first go in.
No, it's great. Yeah.
And then at a certain point, the music starts getting eerie. And there are people there that you're like, why is, like, your mother is there. And you're like, why is my mom here?
So far, the whole the boss battle is my favorite, but also the whole castle sequence from the moment you step in the doors has been my favorite.
Okay.
Yeah,
that might be true of me as well. I did really like just all the different choices that it made here to accentuate the strangeness of this place, the eeriness. I mean, at a certain point, music comes in and it is eerie and creepy. Mm-hmm. And then you're making your way around and you're fighting the under bosses on your way to fighting Magus. Is there anything in particular you want to highlight there? I mean, I just love the sort of pulling the face off to reveal the skeletons beneath or whatever. That, aspect of revealing, all these things that you're kind of looking at and scratching your head at what's going on. It's because they're bad guys. They're in disguise, like that other castle you were in.
Yeah. Right. In the cathedral or whatever. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I mean, they continued that theme. I feel like the Fiend Lord, as I think they call, at least in my translation, they call the magus the fiend lord interchangeably. I think I have, those are the same people. I think I have that right. But anyway,
yes.
Yeah. And so they continue that theme. So I guess in retrospect, you kind of expect nothing less from going into his castle. But I agree with you, like tonally very cool. The music that I actually thought the artwork in the castle was quite good too. You know, like it really fit well, especially the entrance. We mentioned even little things like the bat that follows you around, right? You know that eventually will turn into something a la Dracula, and it did. And not necessarily level design, but I just feel like layout, because there is that weird phase of creepiness in the early moments where you're walking through and these creepy people, including your mother, which is super awesome, you know, but nothing's happening. You're like, what do I need to trigger for like the next?
They're letting it build.
Yeah. Very good pacing. And the way that the castle's laid out, right? Because you have to kind of go through all these different hallways, and then eventually, even once you start fighting, you beat the first two, you start going up, right? Like it almost, not side scroller, but it turns into a different perspective when you're chasing Ozzie. There's puzzles with like the floor stuff and some funny things where you can, you know, step on certain switches first and then the enemies will fall through.
Yes.
It's great.
It is really, really terrific. And if you go down, if you end up falling through yourself, they're down there. And you have to fight them.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I did that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where's there then? What when you say down?
There's another place that you're basically. So at the beginning, you go in and you free like Kino. Maybe is that right?
No, not
Kino. What is the? Oh, that's the other castle. That's the reptite castle. The reptite castle has the traps that drop the enemies that you have to. I'm sorry, I've got the wrong one. Continue.
Oh, maybe I do too then. Sorry, I had that backwards then.
Yeah, I think we're mixing up the two, because I feel like you end up going down to get Magus, right?
You're maybe, well, because Ozzie, remember, he has those.
He does have those all those different traps. Maybe you are chasing him up. I kind of lose track of that stuff.
Well, anyway.
You are chasing him from room to room to room.
Yeah.
And he's got all sorts of different weird traps. There's one with conveyor belts. There's one with the floor falling away. Ultimately, you finally defeat him with that was kind of a fun combat too, because he's pretty much undefeatable, but he's got these four.
Oh yeah,
there's four chains that are rigged up that you have to attack those instead, and they look like just part of the environment. And that was really fun too, to treat these objects as interactables, basically. I mean, it felt sort of swashbuckling in a way, right? That you could, imagine Errol Flynn in there swinging from one to the other, just using something in the environment to make the combat more dynamic. So,
well, it mixed it up, right? Because you've been fighting these bosses in traditional way this whole time, and you're like, oh, what is, it gives you something different. And it's a really good example, which we've talked about, I think, on the podcast with various games, of an introduction of essentially a sub mechanic, right? Because he's using those cranks on you throughout the whole sort of previous chase,
right?
Where he's huffing and puffing. I think Ozzie in general was just a great character. And then you get to his final section, and then you use the cranks on him, right? So it's just a great, like, without hand holding you and hitting you over the head with the answer. You know what I mean? You're like, you know what to do because he's been doing it to you the whole time. So it's almost like it's just a reward, right? For making it the whole way. So yeah, great build up. And then, the Magus battle specifically.
Why don't you take that, because you were particularly enjoying that one.
Well, I think I mentioned in previous episodes, I don't remember if it was first or second, my dumb expectation of JRPGs that did come to fruition with Final Fantasy IX specifically in a couple cases is the very sort of elemental centric, like we talked about with Pokemon, rock, paper, scissors boss fights, where you have a certain element you need to use at a certain time, blah, blah, blah. And so one of the things I loved about the Magus fight, not only is he sort of just kind of a, melodramatic boss, etc. And there's sort of the build up to the Lavos stuff, but also mechanically, every time you hit him, there's a little message that comes up and says the next damage type that he will only take damage from the next damage type X or Y or Z. And so you're just constantly keeping you on your toes, right? By keeping track of what you should hit him with. And if you don't have the right type, then you kind of just hit him anyway to cycle it to the next one. Because I didn't have Luca with me, so like I couldn't really use any fire related stuff. So just kind of figuring that stuff out, and it was like, I guess I loved it because it did meet my expectations for sort of like having to really pay attention and, use abilities you're not used to using and that kind of stuff, right? Because you're trying to do as much damage as you can.
Right, but multiple characters had a role at the same time, which is nice because, Chrono can use the lightning, and for me, I had Marle with the ice, and then I guess I had the frog, and he was sort of jumping in when he could, basically, to try to do some kind of damage. And then at a certain point, the Magus starts basically taking a chance to do something else. It says something like that, right? Right. So and you can use whatever you want, just wail on him as much as you possibly can. Right. It's very interesting and very, very much sort of paying attention, keeping track. And it took me a moment to go, what's going on? The first couple of things and have nothing do any damage and go, oh, okay, I see what it's telling me. So yeah, it was pretty good. It's pretty good back and forth. And all of the boss battles have felt challenging but not overwhelming, which has been nice. There's a couple that look like they're going to be just killer, and then they end up not being too bad. So, they are, but you get them, eke them out. So.
Yeah, I agree. I think the balance is very good for based on at least the way that I've been leveling. I don't know. I keep meaning to text you beforehand so we can compare notes before we start. But maybe for the last episode we can talk about what levels we're at, because I don't know, because I got off the beaten track a couple times. If I kind of accidentally did a little bit of grinding and I'm a little bit higher than I need to be, again, I feel like generally it's pretty, like on most of the regular battles, non-boss battles, I'm just putting on auto combat. Like I'm just not even bothering and just doing something else for a second.
Do you have auto combat?
Yeah, I have an auto combat button. Oh, you don't have an auto combat button?
I don't have an auto combat button.
You do not?
No, I don't.
Oh, okay.
I don't think so. Yeah, no. I certainly haven't noticed one. That's funny.
Why? Yeah, they'll just kind of, the AI will take over and they'll just take things, like the trash essentially. Right. Sure. But yeah, so I'm just wondering if I'm a little over leveled, but yeah, I feel like the balance, I agree that, in almost every case, the bosses have felt like a little bit like skin of teeth, but then you finish it. Yeah. And you're like, oh, thank goodness. So you feel like that's a sign of great balance, right? Where you really get a little bit of tension, but not frustration. The only boss I've had I think it took me 3 tries, was the one we finished this session with, the Gaia, whatever.
Giga Gaia.
Giga Gaia. Yeah, I think it was 3. I think I died 2 times. So that was the only trouble one I had, figuring out what to do there. But yeah, it's good.
Did you die to the one in the Dream Castle, Dalton, I guess, and the Prophet?
No,
you can actually beat that. Okay, so you can beat that. You still lose, story wise. You still get.
Oh, okay. I just gave something away, so I'm a little bit ahead of you accidentally. So you might have guessed you fight Dalton again. Oh, no, that first one where you're supposed to lose. No, I didn't win that one.
Oh, okay. I did win it, but you still.
Yeah,
story-wise, still get cast down or whatever. Yeah, right. But getting ahead of ourselves. So we went from Magus's castle. Where did we go back in time again at that point? What happened? Oh, right. So there was the whole scene with Lavos, and he was trying to summon, and he's like trying to explain what's going on, and then you wake up in the past.
Yeah.
is what happens. Yeah. Okay.
The thing that I was going to mention about that moment, which I love, and this is an example of what I was alluding to earlier of like the unraveling the mystery of Lavos and like what actually this sort of mythological creature or whatever it ends up being is all about, is because that's a good moment where you notice, where you realize there's an aha moment of like everything they've been telling you about Lavos so far is actually incorrect, because it turns out the Magus was summoning Lavos, and Lavos has already been here. You know what I mean? Has been here
right.
for generations. And you're like, oh, okay, of course, now we're going to go back to BC era, because that's probably when they hit, you know, and then when he hit, and then, and so then you wake up, like you said, and then in my case, the robot, that's an example where the robot says, well, my databanks say that he came from the year 600, blah, blah, blah. And like, how can that be? You know, so it's just kind of, again, playing against the story, expectations of the story, which is cool. But yeah, you wake up in 65 million BC. But I don't remember why you exactly wake up there, but
yeah, that was super unclear to me as well. I had no real explanation for how I got to there. That didn't make a lot of sense to me. That was a transition that I mean, maybe, but why go there? Like, it didn't. I don't know. It didn't make any sense. Probably something to do with Lavos, right? Because Lavos appeared then. I don't know. Like, I don't know that I could really. I'm not sure that felt a little tenuous, but
right. I think things were like I think we were going to die, right, if we hadn't, and I think somehow we teleported out of there or something. Anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're back there, and we've got the problem again where we've got to deal with the reptites. I don't remember exactly why. Oh, I guess they set fire to the Laruba village to the north, and so we go up there, and
a little forced.
Yeah, a little forced for sure.
Stuff.
Yeah, you got to go do this thing. But what that ends up with us doing, and it took me a little while to find my way to this, was to be able to catch a ride on pterodactyls. So, it ended up in a good place. That's cool, because that's the only way to get. Because they tell you, oh, well, the reptites are over to the east. Azalea is over to the east. And I went and bumped against all of that and was like, where am I just missing a path here? I just was like baffled. And after a while, I'm just like, well, let me just go wander around and see if I've missed something else on the map. And of course I had. So that was cool to kind of make my way up and be able to use fly around on these pterosaurs. I'm not sure. That's I mean, they're no golden eagles, but so I was a little confused.
The cool, I mean, and talk about it again, another nice sort of unique sort of gimmick or mechanical element to be surprised by, of flying around. Like you're always so limited by the continents, right? The islands,
right? And then in the game so far, and so you're now flying around. That's just very liberating, and then you kind of get to see what you've only seen out of the corner of the screen by flying right over to where that Lavos thing is. There's another fortress there or something. They have a name for it. But the other thing I want to mention there that also happens, I think it's in 600. I'm probably going to get this wrong, but my memory is, if in 600, if you go up to, is it where the fair is? No, because that's where you come from. There's one of the eras, you can go to a location and find a big blue kind of glowing diamond. Did you find that? I did not.
Okay, so there's an area that is in one of the eras where you can go to this section of the map where there's a big blue, basically like a big ancient sort of ritual area, and then there's like a diamond force field or pyramid force field over it. You can kind of walk all around it. You can't interact with it at all. And then in the antiquity area that we'll get to in a second, you see a similar thing on the map, but you can't get to it yet, I think is how it goes. And then the reason I bring this up now is that with the pterodactyls, if you go to one of the islands that you can land and go inside a cave and you find a sunbeam coming through into the cave. But you can't do anything with it.
I know what you're going to be able to do with that later.
Yeah, and I have a theory as well, but you know what I mean? Like there's these cool breadcrumbs that because of the way the world is structured, you can go and see these things before you can actually use them. So there's always a double-edged sword with that, of course, as we've probably talked about many times on the podcast, of like, it's great to give people this sort of cool exploration moment, but sometimes it can also confuse people because you're like, do I need to do something with this big blue pyramid? You know, and people can be like hitting their head against the wall with like, what do I do? What do I do? When
that's one of Ron Gilbert's adventure game rules that we talked about in particular back in Day of the Tentacle. Right. Another time travel.
Yeah, there you go. That's probably the one that was on the tip of my tongue. But yeah, I mean, that's so, yeah, I'm always mixed on those, but I love that. I think we both have a theory about what that cave would hold, even though there's nothing to do there now. And then the pyramid thing, I think I have a theory about too, but you know, it's just neat that you get to go there with the pterodactyls and it's not critical path. So
yeah, well, so you are starting to find some of those exploration things that you can do. I didn't find that. I did find in, I forget which time zone, whether it was 600 or 1000, but I found a place in a sort of desert looking area in a place where we've been, but it was sort of brown, sandy kind of area. I found a sinkhole.
Whoa, serious?
Yeah, that went into the earth, and underneath there, I got myself kind of overgeared. I ran around, and there was chests all over, and I would run away in combat. I'd get into combat. The first combat, I was getting creamed, and so I ran away with my last standing character, and then I just ran around and picked up all the chests, and anytime I got into combat,
you ran away.
I'd run away. It was amazing. And there was a boss under there to fight, but I don't know if it's on a timer or something. I don't know how you trigger the boss, but I was able to get, I think, all of this stuff in this cave. You know, there were some things like full ethers or full tonics or whatever and things like that were no big deal, but there was like a full suit of armor and an Aeon helm and an Aeon whatever chest plate.
What?
Yeah,
I gotta go for this now.
Yeah, see?
How funny.
Yeah, it's on the southern continent where the other villages like Pore or whatever it was. I forget what the name of it.
It's probably 1,000 then.
Yeah, south of there, I believe. So you should be able to get to that as well. I thought that was great. But using the runaway was super helpful because I had not... I didn't know if that was available to me. And people were saying, yeah, you do this. Stream helps me so much.
There definitely are a lot of those kind of things, right? I mean, I forgot where I saw them. Like, we're off track, but is it jerky? Did you do the jerky thing? Does that ring a bell when I say jerky to you?
No.
Okay. No. I think
Did you do the jerky thing? Tim, I've been doing jerky things to you for 20 years.
Yeah, look who I'm asking. No, I think it's jerky. It may be a different food item, but there's somebody in, I think it's 1,000. It's either, might have them flipped, that there's somebody, a pedestrian or an NPC in 1,000 who keeps saying she wants some jerky. And I think in 600, there's somebody who's selling jerky. so I keep meaning to go. I just can't find the person that's selling it again. But, you know, I'm only bringing that up because, like, the sinkhole, it seems like there's a bunch of little things. Like, also in the Age of Antiquity, there's somebody in one of the towns that has a sapling. Did you find that lady who has a seed sapling?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes. You can tell her to plant it anyway secretly or whatever. Yeah, I totally did that.
So I can't wait to see what that results in, you know, that kind of stuff. So anyway, but continue. So we get the pterodactyls.
Right.
We go to that fortress.
We fight our way through there, and that's where there's lots of different sort of traps that you can, you know, send monsters down holes and things like that. Right. It was fun area that way, and I definitely was using that to my advantage, but I felt some trepidation at times of like, I don't know, do I want to step on this one too? It was felt risky at times, which was nice, kind of a different flavor to have. And then ultimately you make it to Azala's final tower or whatever, and you fight some sort of dragon, I guess, that Azala is riding or commanding or what have you. Another good boss fight. Nothing kind of sort of special, really. I don't think. I mean, there was basically just beat it up a bunch. That's when I started using dual techniques between Ayla and Chrono, though the Volt something.
I use that one too. Yeah. Thunder,
with the light.
Is it called Thunder or something? Well,
mine's definitely Volt. Okay. It's Volt, but I mean that might be a translation difference. Yeah. It's the two of them. He electrifies her, and she jumps up and does 1,000 points of damage. Yeah.
Yep. Same one. That's a great one for that fight. Yeah, I discovered that one too. I think mine's called Thunder Fall or something like that. But really quick before I have to mention that moment before you go into that fight where you meet that other boss henchman of Azala. Again, the
Megasaur dude,
the Megasaur guy, and he's flexing as you walk in, and
Nizbel, something like that.
Nizbel, yeah, and you can just walk right by him, and he even, well, at least the way it worked for me, I think you walk in and I think you can talk to him, and he says, "Yeah, Azala's back there." He's
just like, she's over there.
Yeah, and you're like, oh. Okay, thanks. Didn't I fight you before? And then you walk past him, and as you're about to leave, he's like, wait. I meant to fight you. You're not supposed to get by me.
Yeah,
it's good. A great little comedic moment with that character, especially because you'd met him before and fought him. Anyway, yeah, so you beat... but I don't remember the result of that is...
that's when Lavos comes.
Right, the red star... which I loved as well, because I feel like we'd seen the red star someplace else on the top of the mountain. You see the red star in the distance.
Yes.
So there's some sort of foreshadowing, right? Cosmic foreshadowing there, which is cool. Yeah. So then the whole race of reptites ends, because. Starts an ice age, I guess, and it kills all the reptites. Yep. That's a pretty wild thing. And you end up in a cave with Ayla, and she's trying to dig at the ground because she's like, oh my God, he's already disappeared. And that's when we go to the dream people in 12,000 BC, right? That must be. Yeah, I think isn't somebody with us that opens a portal? I don't remember how we get there. It's funny, the transitions we always forget because
I feel like she digs in the ground and a portal is under there or something like that, and you go through it.
Something happens there, yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly. Yeah, and maybe that just takes you there. Yeah, maybe that's how that happens.
I think so. You go to and the ice age is at the lower level, right? And then the magic people are up in the sky.
Right, you have to find the beam that will take you up. Basically, you need to find the what's that thing in Thor, the bridge.
Yeah, I forget the name of it.
Rainbow Bridge.
Yeah, it's called the Rainbow Bridge. That's exactly what it's called. No, it's got a much cooler name. Yeah, I mean, this was the moment for me when you get to the age. At least my translation, they think they call it the Antiquity Age, where I was like. What's that?
The Bifrost.
The Bifrost. It's actually, Norse, right? It's a Norse.
Also referred to as a rainbow bridge, by the way.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. But, Norse mythology thing. Anyway, I guess I had, again, kind of going back to the theme of surprises, I guess I thought because we had returned to a couple places that we had seen every location, essentially every time era. And so when we went to this one, I was very surprised and excited, and it kind of like, I don't know why it took me this long, but it really got its hooks into me at that point. Cause it's like, wow, what are they going to throw at us? You know what I mean? What's next? anything can happen. And so, because I just didn't see this particular age coming for whatever reason, because like I said, I thought we'd sort of, I don't know, I felt like we had every sort of trope handled, but then I forgot about the trope of flying machines that are magic, and steampunk, and you know what I mean? Like,
also floating islands,
right? So I feel like this is very, like, now at this point, we've seen sort of every major trope of this kind of stuff, of anime and JRPG stuff, right? Because there's apparently flying machines, and there's a little bit of steampunkiness going on with magic, so it's a neat area.
So not to belabor this one, because we're starting to run real long. We just to dash through it. There's a lot of people here to talk to, which is a big deal. There's just a ton of different things, as well as the plate of sashimi. Ton of sort of world building of what this society is about. They're powering their whole society off of Lavos, it seems, through the interactions of this prophet and this and Dalton, who are working together, it seems, and have sort of corrupted the queen somehow. And her children, Janice and Schala, or Schala, I'm not sure how to pronounce that. Schala is sort of rebelling against that and wants to maintain the way the kingdom was before. She thinks this is a bad idea. They're trying to complete some ocean palace. And basically what happens, I guess, at that point is you go and confront the queen and have to fight Dalton and the prophet over this, which is a battle that you can win and lose at the same time, right? You have to lose it in a sense, right? Which we kind of already addressed. But yeah, then I guess they send you away, basically. Schala uses her pendant, which is the same pendant that Marle has, to power a portal to send you away.
Right.
And you end up in 2300 AD.
You find a way to power up your amulet to do the same thing, and then you can go through that door. Finally, we now have the ability to open all those magical locks, right? And I think Robo actually says, we've seen one of those doors in my time. Well, that's what he said for me.
Marle says it for me, actually. Yeah. I think I've seen one of these before.
Right. And then you go through, and then I think there's a portal in there, right? And then you go back. When does then you go back because you need to get the ship.
Right. You end up in 2300, and they basically say, oh, remember we saw that in 2300.
Now, I wanted to ask you about that because you didn't go through the sewers, right?
I had gone through the sewers.
You had?
I had forgotten. I had, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because that's optional.
That's where they were. I might be.
Yeah, I don't think they mention it, and they definitely tell you can go there, but I don't think.
Yeah, I definitely did, because I went back through. I was like, oh yeah, I did this, and I was like, oh yeah, I thought I had done the sewers. And I couldn't. I don't remember. I mean, I ended up going and seeing the place where we were going to end up this time, and finding that door, right, so that they could refer back to that door, and the dude who was there trying to program everything to make things ready for you, basically, I guess, and prepare the ship.
It's so cool. It feels like this weird culmination, right? Because it's just, I just love it because you stood right there, right? You talked to the blue guy. You were there in that room. You're like, what is this for? Of course, I'll be back here someday. And then I love the moment that it turns out that he had uploaded his consciousness into the blue guy.
Yeah.
And he pushes, and he's like, and then earlier, if you talk to him, he says something about chairs, right? He's like, oh, I thought I had to do something with some seats or something, he says for me. Like, what the heck is he talking about? And then you're in there, and he like shoves these seats into the room. you're like, how do I get in this ship?
Yeah, I walked all around that thing a million times.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I must be missing something.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, I guess. And then, of course, like, oh, of course, I need to trigger it by leaving.
Yeah. Yeah. I do that a little bit too much, but
yeah.
But it's just like an interesting full circle that you can only do in kind of a time travel story like this. And then you like once you get in that ship, you're just like, all right, it's on. We're king of the world now.
Yeah,
we can do anything, kind of thing.
Yeah, on the way into it, you do interact with the guru of life, which is a bunch of sparkles in there, and it kind of tells you a little more about the story.
Yeah,
yeah.
He recorded them, which I also love too, because another sort of nice unraveling is if you talk to all the who is it NPCs in the magic era, or books, or I don't remember where you get the information exactly, but they kind of like you start building the mythology around the gurus themselves.
Right.
There's three
people talk about it. Yeah, for sure.
And then Malchior is one of them. And then you hear about these other two, and then you get to that future, like you said, and then you see you find out he's uploaded his consciousness because he's probably long dead, but it's kind of neat to sort of like listen to his recordings, right? And early voice recording pickups in games, maybe,
Yeah.
So yeah, that was fun.
Then your job is to rescue him by going to the floating island, which is chained. It's Mt Woe is the name of it. You get there via the Earthbound people, because when you go back to that time, I guess that's where you end up.
Yeah, they put you there, and the ladder is conveniently down.
Yes, conveniently nearby, and takes you into their kind of camp. And we've already talked about their kind of tone and what's going on there. There's a shop and things like that. It's like any other kind of town. And you kind of walk around in there, and people tell you stuff, and you're sent through the cave of the beast to make your way to Mt Woe. There's a boss battle in there. That's actually the only boss battle I lost any time at all. I was not reading what was going on in that boss battle with the two big lizards and the sort of commanding imp or whatever. I was not doing that well, but I finally got through that.
The ones that are like, one was fire and water, you mean? Or like...
Right. Yeah, well, fire and water, and it would jump on them and ride them and do all sorts of different attacks. And I just was not, I did not read what was going on there soon enough that I kind of got behind the eight ball on health. And before I knew it, I didn't have any options left. So, and then basically you make your way up to the mountain, and you free Melchior by defeating the Giga Gaia, which is what we talked about, which is also a cool fight. I like having the two fists to having to take those out, and then it's coming back, and all of that was really
and really one of them was like the defense fists.
Right. One would like heal it, and one was its offensive fist. If it could do more, if it had them both, I think it could do more damage and things. So there's a lot going on there. I have Ayla and Chrono still, of course, and they have a line attack called Falcon something or other, where basically I could do almost 1,000 points of damage to both hands at once.
Oh, nice.
Because it attacks things in a line and a horizontal line across the screen. And then I would use the volts, which for you was the thunder something or other, right. For the head. That was a cool kind of back and forth as well. I'd forgotten to mention with the dragon that it has one of those things that is always bad in JRPGs. It's always really, really bad. Which is when an enemy starts counting down. That's never good.
What do you mean counting down?
It says 5, 4. Did that not happen for you?
Which
the dragon the reptite was that Azalea was using?
Don't think so.
Oh, really? Maybe you beat it really fast.
I don't remember that. No. What is that? What does that usually mean?
Well, when it gets down to 0, it does a massive amount of damage.
Oh, okay. Maybe I just got lucky then and finished it fast.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good tip on the horizontal line thing. What I ended up doing with that, because like I said, I had trouble. I felt like the respawning of both, when you took both fists out, the respawning would happen fairly quickly, like in the next turn or two. So what I ended up doing is I would just take out the defensive fist alone, and I would not take out the other one and just focus on getting, his head and doing damage to just kill him. So he couldn't do the double attacks, but he also couldn't heal. But then he wouldn't respawn the defensive arm as quickly.
Interesting.
Heal. So it was just, that kind of like, I don't know if it was like super effective or not, but it was like a strategy that I could do. The fact that I could even do that is neat. And it felt
I think that all of that stuff has to be there, right? I mean, I think I was using tons of area attack magic. Like Marle was hasting and healing, and then if everybody was hasted and reasonably healthy, I would have her start using ice too, which is a multi-target, so you target everything. So if I could do that line attack, then I could hit with the ice to finish them off, and then she could just keep doing the hastes and all that stuff. That haste is a huge game changer.
Yeah, that's a big one. I wonder if anyone else gets something like that. I'll have to explore around. Yeah, the in pre-show I was mentioning to Brett that I don't know if other combinations have this, but with Glenn and Robo and Chrono, I get an option to do like a triple attack with all three of them, which is like a concentrated damage where they all hit the same thing. It's not a line attack, so it's just, one target. So it's good for bosses when you're trying to do, hit a specific, the boss itself or a piece of the boss. And I think it does like 15 or more, 1500 or more. But it's kind of, I didn't know that there would be a triple attack, where you have to combine all three of them. And I thought that was kind of a neat addition.
Yeah, no, it's pretty great. And I know because I found one that at some point I'll be able to use. I found a document. There was a puzzle in the castle, the Dream People castle, where the queen is.
Okay.
Or actually, it's in one of the buildings. It might be in Kaja or whatever the other place is. I can't remember exactly where it was, but there was a puzzle. So
I'm going to go look for that then. I figured there was something with those books or some other stuff. There's some stuff going on there.
It's those books.
Okay, I figured I should have spent more time
on there. Yeah, there was a clue, and I was like, "Oh, this is a clue," and I wrote it down on my notes because I'm like, "Oh, this is totally a JRPG clue," and then I thought it might come up later, and it actually was pretty close to where I found the clue. So, good to know. All right, let's take a quick break and then come back and read some feedback. I have two things to say to you before I do that. Mm-hmm. One is Time Lapse is that movie I was talking about, and it takes photos that are a day in the future.
Okay.
They get a picture that shows them what's going to happen the next 24 hours from then or something like that.
So they're taking pictures of themselves.
They're taking pictures of themselves, but themselves the next day.
Yeah.
Which is wild.
Huh.
And then that PS2 game that I was looking up, that I was trying to remember the name of, it was a Konami game called Shadow of Memories.
Vague memory.
Yeah, it's a very strange game. It came out in 2001. So not the first year, a couple of years in. But yeah, wild game. Definitely feels like an early title, though. It's definitely a relatively low budget kind of experimental thing. And apparently it has 7 endings. Okay. Let's take a quick break.
Okay. Sounds good.
back from the break. We've got a few pieces of feedback this time. There's no in-depth questions, so it's mostly just, and most of them actually touch on similar things. So we're going to kind of breeze by them pretty quickly because we are once again at a ongoing 5-star runtime, keeping you pandemic company. You can send these to devgameclub@gmail.com with your comments or questions. And, of course, we also love your reviews when we have them. If you've been putting reviews in your podcast apps and I haven't seen them or read them on the cast or sung them, then by all means point me at them so I can find them. I am subscribed to get all kinds of ones from the podcasts app on the Apple Store, but I don't have inroads into other things, so pointing me in that direction would be very helpful if you'd like to have your review read on the air. But first, email, sir. Why don't you go ahead and take that first one?
Okay. Subject is ATB, which I assume is Active Time Battle, and Exploration from Walker Farrell.
I think it's I got nothing. Sorry, go ahead. Yes, it's Active Time Battle.
Hey, Tim and Brett. As far as I know, Active Time Battle was in all of the Final Fantasy games on the SNES and would also appear in all of the PS1 titles. So it was not really brand new to Chrono Trigger, although it is kind of a new twist that for the tech combos involving 2 or 3 characters, you would have to wait for all the relevant gauges to fill up before you could fire off the tech. In fact, for me, this made wait mode a little more annoying because I would have to wait outside of the menu for the bar to fill up. Oh, I see. Yeah. Whereas in active mode, I could have it queued up already and fire it off the moment the second or third gauge filled up. I see. It's a good point. The greater structure of Chrono Trigger is definitely in the general lineage of the 16-bit JRPG structure. Although there is some exploration off the beaten path available in early game, it is mostly gated dead ends, as Tim found to his frustration. Like other games of this time period, especially Final Fantasy games, in the final chapter you were suddenly given much more freedom to do things and go places before entering the end game at your leisure. And this section, the Fated Hour, is where most of Chrono Trigger's true exploration and, in my opinion, the most compelling uses of the time travel mechanics are found. So I hope you don't get so discouraged from your experience going left early in the game that you don't do so before the end too. All the best, Walker Farrell.
Okay, good to know.
Good to know in both accounts. Yeah. So I mean, even though Brett is JRPG master, as he said, you haven't played the SNES, sort of like the 16-bit.
Yeah, stuff, I really came to it in the PS2 era. I played quite a number from the PS2 and some late PS1 era, including the various Final Fantasies from that time, and Chrono Cross, which I have to say I don't really remember, but I'm actually thinking of revisiting it, so that might come up in the stream someday. It's and we also heard from 2 others who were going to say the same thing or similar things about the active time battle, as well as Biostats via Twitter, letting us know that this was a thing in the 16-bit era of games. I have one here from Eric Anderson. Subject is ATB systems in Final Fantasies. It goes even further afield. He says, hello. On the recent episode about Chrono Trigger, you guys were talking about how Final Fantasy iterated on the active time battle system after Chrono Trigger. They have built upon this early version to varied results. Sometimes they regress to more turn-based combat. Off the top of my head, so I may be wrong, Final Fantasy IV, 2 in the US, was the first game to use ATB, but the meter itself didn't appear until they released the game later. I suppose re-released the game later. And Final Fantasy V through 9 all used this same basic system. However, Final Fantasy X went back to a strictly turn-based system that allowed you to switch characters out during the battle and showed you the order of turns on the side of the screen so you could plan accordingly. The direct sequel to X, Final Fantasy X-2, is considered by many to be the best combat system, and it went back to ATB, but included a job system that could be switched out during the battle. So each character sort of had jobs, just as a sidebar, that they independently sort of powered up. that they independently put XP into, I guess you'd say. Then he continues. Final Fantasy 11, 12, and 14 used basically an MMORPG battle system that incorporated ATB, and 13 had ATB and job system in the form of paradigm shifts. Final Fantasy 15, in my view, is more like Kingdom Hearts with a more action RPG approach. Final Fantasy VII Remake seems to mix action RPG with ATB and may end up being the culmination and evolution of the ATB feature they started all those years ago. I've been a huge fan of the Final Fantasy series since childhood, but have always sort of hated ATB, preferring a more turn-based system like the ones in Persona, Dragon Quest, or Lost Odyssey, so Final Fantasy X has always been my favorite battle system. I just started playing Chrono Cross, the sequel, really more of a spiritual successor to Chrono Trigger, and its battle system is turn-based, but with this weird percentage thing you can choose that increases damage. I don't totally understand it, to be honest. At any rate, thanks for the podcast. It's been a welcome distraction from the pandemic and the struggles of working remotely and homeschooling a toddler, who, by the way, does not care for the Final Fantasy series and instead prefers Stardew Valley. Even though Tim's leaving, and this is inaccurate. Tim is no longer leaving soon for his big hike, Eric. He says, stay safe and healthy. Thank you, Eric. Yeah, so there's a huge survey of the various systems.
That's good to know. So 10 is the one that Reed keeps telling me to play. You might have said that I should play it as well. I think it's Reed's favorite. Reed Knight, who's a friend of the podcast.
I think he loves 10-2.
He might, yeah, it might be 2, but I think he knows me, and so he
for you,
tells me to play.
10 would probably be the one for you to play anyway.
Because I can't play 10 and 10-2 and not play 10. So.
I would agree with that anyway. I do actually think that is one case where I do actually think it is probably better to play 10 first to really for 10-2 to land for kind of what the setup is for 10-2. You really, I think, need to have experienced 10 and had Yuna as a character in one way before she's a character in a different way. So I love 10-2, so I totally am in Reed's camp with that. I really, really enjoyed that, though 9 still is my favorite.
Someday, maybe. It would be interesting to
I also really like 12. That's the one where you basically program your party. So that's fun too.
Man, I don't know.
So many Final Fantasies.
I don't know if I want
so many 60-hour games for you to play.
Can of worms, yeah. I'm really scared right now.
Next, the year 2021 is the year we play all the Final Fantasies.
Yeah, it is true though. Like you were joking earlier about your master plan, but it is true. Every time we play one of these, I do have this itch that starts.
Yep.
I think because as we talked so much about, I'm not a JRPG player. I've played nearly none of them other than the podcast, and so it's not exactly a fair statement, but it's almost like a new genre to me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And because it's still an RPG at its core, but there's enough differences from Western RPGs, both in storytelling and in mechanics and systems, that it's new enough to where I'm like, oh man, there's this whole new world, but I'm just afraid. I have the next one.
I was not playing WoW all those years.
Yeah.
I was playing JRPGs while you were on that infinite treadmill.
Exactly. Yeah. And I'm still playing. Okay, here we go. My second one, active versus weight and character charm. Oh, interesting. From James Roberts. I've warned you twice now. I love this game and you keep indulging me. He says in parentheses up front. Tim asked last week what players very familiar with Chrono Trigger think about choosing between active and weight battles. I usually play in active mode, and this is what most purists would tell you to do. In my opinion, however, you should play whichever you enjoy most. Thank you, James. I agree. Tim also mentioned that the active mode made it difficult for him to consider taking full advantage of all the techs available to him, and this is tragic to me. You both spoke a little last episode about how fun Frog's character backstory was and how great it is to get good characterization in games. While it doesn't give you any plot details, each character's techs and dual and triple texts contain a ton of that character's personality. Ayla, for example, has texts that are very primal and chaotic. Most of them involve her throwing something at an enemy, or throwing an enemy at an enemy, or a party member at an enemy, or just outright biting the enemy. so on and so forth. That's true. I did use her for a while. She is a great character, and that's really true. It's good design, good character design. One party member who you may or may not have gained yet. Should I keep reading? Does not participate in dual text with the rest of the party, which is in itself an expression of this character's personality. Interesting. I always found that pretty cool. I would recommend anyone new to the game to set the option to wait mode and try out all of the text at least once. There's a lot of charm to be found there. Oh, I thought he meant a different charm. And the creativity put into these moves is one of the best parts of the game. And he has a final note here. Note that you will have to finish at least one battle with a pair or trio of party members for them to learn any missing dual or triple text between them. Also, every dual and triple tech have prerequisite solo texts that the party members in question have to already have learned. For example, if Chrono knows Cyclone and Luca knows Flame Toss, the two participate in battle together. They will learn the dual tech Fire Whirl. Have a good week, James Roberts. He is a master. I love that he loves this game. Yeah, okay. So obviously we've unlocked these duels, but I guess I didn't realize how they were being unlocked. It just sort of
right. Yeah, it seems like there's some dependencies there, and it's not like when you add in a character into your party that you'll automatically get whatever text they would have at that level. Right. You still have to have a combat with them to unlock it, which makes sense. I guess I understand some of what I have seen thus far as a result. So in looking back after having read this email.
He's also he said triple text plural, so there must be multiple triple text. Well, I mean,
you have one.
You said you found
I found one, yes.
Yeah, so there's at least those two, but I'm sure you get more and more. Yeah.
I'm sure. And I'm sure they're very powerful.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you're already finding that the one you have is quite powerful. So,
yeah, I use it all the time.
I mean, you are giving up. That's, probably something we should talk about later, but it is a balance thing of like, you're giving up 3 attacks, you'd expect it to be pretty powerful. Well,
you're giving up 3 attacks, but also three support as well, right? So,
right. Yeah. Or 3 actions.
Yeah. 3 actions. So it is a great balancing mechanism, because of that, because I use actually Glenn and Robo as both as healers sometimes. So if I'm doing my triple, right, I lose both my healers in one turn, and that can be devastating.
It can be rough.
Yeah. So
all right,
good info. Thanks, James. Keep it up. I'll think of some more questions for you next time in our final episode, so you can rattle off all the answers.
Well, and there you are alluding to it. Our final episode of Chrono Trigger is next week, so we're going to finish this thing. Mm-hmm. And it sounds like you're going to have the opportunity to go as much left as you want.
Yeah, I got a lot of chests to open.
Game. I know. I've thought about the same thing. Is there's a number of places I have not been, and I'm going to have to go back and run around and find where those chests were. And every time I play a game like this, where there's something like that, where I'm like, I'm going to be able to open that later, I think, I should have written down where all those were.
Yeah.
But I never do.
No,
so here we are.
I'm pissed at myself.
Yeah. Okay, well, thanks so much for joining us. You can, of course, send us email, as I've mentioned a couple of times, at devgameclub@gmail.com. I almost said devjamesclub, because we're getting so many emails from James. That's where
I'm sure he loves that.
And, of course, we love any reviews you send our way. We haven't had one in a while, and so we would love to get a review. You can also find us on the web at devgameclub.com, where I put up the show notes. And you can find the show on Twitter at devgameclub, where you can also find my co-host at
Tim Longer Jr. with the JR at the end.
You can find me streaming games on Twitch nightly, playing something other than the podcast, and on the weekends playing for the podcast. As of the day this comes out, I will be beginning Wasteland 2 on my weeknight streams, so come by and check that out. After playing a JRPG, I had kind of a hankering to play a Western RPG. And so one of the things the cast does is the stream does is I put up games for a vote. It was Wasteland 2 versus Torment Tides of Numenera, and Wasteland 2 won out. So that is what I start next.
Oh, both of Obsidian or NX?
Both Obsidian, yeah. Our outro music that you're hearing right now is by Kirk Hamilton, which was commissioned by our friend of the cast, Aaron Evers. We thank them both. Thanks so much for joining us for games this week, and good night.
Good night.